My grandfather worked this port. My father watched it die. They told us we would always need Russian permission to reach the sea. We got tired of asking.
Borders are usually drawn in ink, ratified by treaties, and left untouched for generations. But in the modern era, geography is no longer a fixed constraint. It is an engineering challenge. From the gray waters of the Baltic to the scorching ports of Pakistan, nations are confronting a sobering reality. If you do not control your trade routes, you do not control your future. They are spending billions to move mountains, sever peninsulas, and exploit the melting Arctic. These are not just construction projects, they are strategic gambles with generational consequences, some destined to succeed, others already showing cracks. And the first case study lies on a thin ribbon of sand in Eastern Europe. For decades, the city of Elbląg existed in a geopolitical stranglehold. Located on the Vistula lagoon, it possessed the infrastructure of a major port, but lacked the freedom of one. To reach the open Baltic Sea, every Polish vessel had to navigate a narrow strait near Baltic, waters controlled entirely by the Russian Federation. It was a choke point, a logistical noose. At any moment, Moscow could restrict traffic for military exercises or security concerns, leaving Polish commerce paralyzed. In 2019, Warsaw stopped asking for permission. They initiated a plan to surgically alter the coastline. The target? The Vistula Spit. The goal? To carve a proprietary sovereign exit to the sea. The engineering was aggressive. Crews excavated 28 million cubic feet of earth, effectively severing the peninsula. They poured hundreds of tons of concrete to construct a navigational lock nearly 900 feet long, flanked by swing bridges to maintain local traffic. The cost exceeded 470 million euros. In 2022, the ribbons were cut. The canal was open. But the victory was incomplete. While the door was open, the hallway was too small. The lagoon's average depth is a mere 6 to 10 feet, far too shallow for commercial freighters. Russia mocked the project as a billion zloty swimming pool for yachts. Moscow claimed the canal was an ecological disaster and a disguised NATO entry point, threatening the strategic fortress of Kaliningrad. But the Polish strategy was always multi-phase. As of 2024, the heavy machinery has returned. Enter the Ursa, a specialized dredging vessel tasked with the final phase, gouging a 5-mile fairway through the lagoon floor. The objective is to deepen the approach to 16 feet and widen the turning basins to nearly 400 feet. By 2026, the final obstacles, the shallow river approach and the narrow fairway, are projected to be eliminated. Poland is betting that this independent artery will revitalize Elbląg, creating thousands of jobs and handling millions of tons of cargo. Whether the economics ultimately justify the investment remains an open question. But for Warsaw, the calculation was never purely financial. It was about sending a signal. The era of asking Russia for access is over. 4,000 miles away, the world's second-largest economy faces a choke point of a different magnitude: the Strait of Malacca, a narrow sliver of water between Indonesia, Malaysia, and Singapore. It is the jugular vein of the global economy. For China, it represents an existential vulnerability. Approximately 70 to 80% of Beijing's energy imports flow through this corridor. If a hostile power were to blockade Malacca during a conflict, China's energy grid could falter within weeks. This is the Malacca dilemma. To mitigate it, Beijing is attempting something audacious: bypass the ocean itself. The solution, at least on paper, is the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, or CPEC, an infrastructure spine designed to link Western China directly to the Arabian Sea, offering an alternative to the vulnerable Malacca route. The crown jewel is Gwadar. Once a sleepy fishing village on the Balochistan coast, it is being transformed into a deep-water port. Chinese engineers have extended berths, begun automating terminals, and constructed a free trade zone intended for heavy industrial traffic. But the project has not come without friction. Local fishermen have been displaced from traditional waters. Baloch separatist groups have launched attacks on Chinese workers, forcing Beijing to fund a dedicated security force. Pakistan's crippling economic crisis has slowed implementation, and several planned projects have been quietly shelved or downscaled. The original vision included a nearly 2,000-mile network of highways and railways, carving a path through some of the most unforgiving terrain on Earth. Alongside the asphalt, planners envisioned a parallel power grid, gigawatts of hydro and thermal energy to fuel the logistics chain. When CPEC was announced in 2015, it carried a headline figure of $62 billion in planned investment. But a decade later, actual disbursements have fallen far short. Analysts estimate that roughly half of the projects have been delayed, canceled, or restructured. The original target date of 2030 for a fully operational energy bypass now appears optimistic at best. Yet Beijing continues to invest, albeit more cautiously. For China, even a partially complete corridor offers strategic value, a hedge against the nightmare scenario of a Malacca blockade. CPEC remains less a finished highway than an ambitious construction site. Its ultimate success will depend not on Chinese engineering, but on Pakistani stability, a variable Beijing cannot control. While China builds across land, Russia turns its gaze to the top of the world. For a century, the Suez Canal has been the default link between Europe and Asia. But the Suez is fragile. A single grounded ship or a regional conflict can sever the line. Russia proposes an alternative that no other nation can offer: the Northern Sea Route. Geographically, it is a shortcut. Bypassing the Mediterranean and the Indian Ocean, it can shave weeks off transit times and save millions in fuel. But the price of admission is ice, and the politics that come with it. Climate change has reduced the summer Arctic ice extent by roughly 40% since satellite records began in 1979. This has extended the navigable window, but the route remains hostile. Unescorted navigation is limited to a brief summer season. For the rest of the year, commerce requires brute force. Russia maintains the world's only fleet of nuclear-powered icebreakers. These atomic giants are the gatekeepers of the route, adding significant costs via mandatory escort fees and specialized insurance, premiums that can inflate shipping expenses by 20 to 30%. Yet the volume is rising. Traffic on the Northern Sea Route has grown from approximately 5 million tons in 2010 to over 36 million tons in 2023, driven largely by Russian liquefied natural gas exports. Moscow has approved a development plan valued at approximately 2.5 trillion rubles, roughly $22 billion at current exchange rates, to build navigational safety systems, expand port infrastructure, and grow the cargo fleet by 2035. There is a bitter irony embedded in this strategy. The same warming climate that makes the Northern Sea Route viable is accelerating environmental damage that scientists warn could prove catastrophic. Russia is, in effect, profiting from the symptoms of a crisis while contributing to its causes. And unlike the Suez, which is governed by international treaty, the Northern Sea Route runs through Russia's exclusive economic zone. Moscow sets the rules, the fees, and the access. For some shippers, this represents opportunity. For others, it is simply trading one form of dependency for another: cold, expensive, and politically fraught. But in a world of volatile southern choke points, the frozen north offers something Moscow believes is priceless: a corridor under a single flag. Sometimes, the trap is not an enemy navy or a frozen sea. Sometimes, it is simple economics. Canada holds the world's third-largest proven oil reserves. But for decades, 99% of its exports flowed to a single customer: the United States. With no alternative buyers, Canadian crude traded at a steep discount, a gap that industry analysts estimated cost the economy billions of dollars annually. The exit door was technically there, the Trans Mountain Pipeline to the Pacific coast, but its capacity was capped at roughly 300,000 barrels per day. To break the American near monopoly, Canada had to expand. The Trans Mountain expansion was a logistical campaign waged against the geography of British Columbia. The project required twinning the existing line across nearly 600 miles of mountains, rivers, and urban centers. Engineers utilized horizontal directional drilling to tunnel beneath sensitive waterways. They installed automated leak detection valves capable of sealing the line in seconds. At the Westridge Marine Terminal, a single 1950s-era berth was replaced with a modern complex capable of loading 3 Aframax tankers simultaneously. But the pipeline did not cross only rock and water. It crossed contested ground. Several First Nations launched legal challenges, arguing the project violated treaty rights and threatened sacred lands. Environmental groups warned of catastrophic spill risks in the confined waters of Burrard Inlet. The opposition was not simply protest, it was litigation, injunctions, and years of delay. The cost was staggering. The original budget of 5 billion Canadian dollars exploded to approximately 34 billion, a nearly 7-fold increase driven by legal battles, regulatory delays, and pandemic-era disruptions. At one point, the project appeared doomed. The Government of Canada ultimately nationalized the pipeline to ensure its completion. In 2024, the valves finally opened. Capacity tripled to nearly 900,000 barrels per day. Almost immediately, the flow of oil began to shift. By late 2024, tankers were bypassing the United States entirely, heading for the energy-hungry markets of Asia. China has since emerged as the largest single buyer of Canadian crude via the Pacific route. For the Canadian energy sector, Trans Mountain represents liberation from a captive market. For the Indigenous communities who opposed it, the fight is not over. They continue to monitor operations and pursue legal remedies for what they view as unresolved harms. The pipeline is complete, but its legacy remains contested. From the dredging of the Vistula to the tunneling of the Rockies, a pattern emerges. Nations are no longer content to trust their fate to the goodwill of neighbors or the stability of international waters. They are pouring concrete and steel to physically rewrite the map of the world. But the pattern is not one of guaranteed success. Poland bets on a canal that may take years to prove its economic worth. China invests in a corridor hamstrung by its partner's instability. Russia wagers on a climate catastrophe continuing in its favor. Canada completes a pipeline over the objections of those whose land it crosses. The cost is measured in the tens of billions. The return is sovereignty, or at least the hope of it. In the 21st century, the only route you can truly trust is the one you build yourself. But building it does not guarantee you a right to try. If you found this video valuable, consider subscribing for more deep dives into the infrastructure reshaping our world. And if you want to understand another geography-defying project, the canal that could break the Suez monopoly, that video is on screen now.